Looper is a 2012 dystopian sci-fi movie starring Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. The film is written by Ram Bergman and James D. Stern and directed by Rian Johnson. It's set in the year 2044 in Kansas City. It's a bleak, crime-riddled, lawless world with open gun violence, a common occurrence, just walking down the street. Everyone is armed and gangs roam the streets. Levitt plays Joe, a self-centered drug addict and a looper, which is an assassin who works for a crime syndicate. They exist in the year 2074, 30 years in the future, and because of advancements in policing and surveillance, they can't dispose of bodies anymore, so they send them back in time to 2044, and loopers like Joe kill the syndicate's enemies and then dispose of the bodies. Pretty clever. And you're paid in silver. So there's that. In this future, some people have a special gene that allows them to do telekinesis, move things with their minds. I have to say, it's quite the ask in this movie for us to believe in both time travel and how that works in this film, and people with these superpowers. And I'm not sure why the film had to have both of these sci-fi elements at the same time, but there you go. I think the telekinesis aspect of the story probably wasn't necessary because the plot could have worked fine without it, but anyway, it does provide some cool action sequences later in the movie. There's a concept called closing your loop. So this is where a looper's future self is sent back in time and they have to kill them. And for this, you get a big payout. And the payout is in gold. And then you're released from your contract. As Joe says, this job doesn't attract the most forward-thinking people. Joe's friend Seth was assigned the task of killing his future self to close his loop. But he just freezes. He couldn't do it. He just freaks out. His future self tells him about a future crime boss called the Rainmaker, who's closing all the loops. And one day, Joe's future self, played by Bruce Willis, is sent back in time for him to dispatch. But old Joe gets the better of him and escapes. Joe is now in serious trouble with his superior, Abe, played by Jeff Daniels. Letting your future self get away results in the syndicate going after you. They hunt you down and eliminate you, actually both of you. Incidentally, Levitt is wearing some prosthetic makeup in this film, which is meant to make him look a little bit more like a young Bruce Willis. It does work sometimes, though the results are a bit mixed, I think. As Joe is trying to escape the syndicate, we then witness events from his future self's perspective, if he'd succeeded in killing his future self and the life he would have had. The time he succeeds and collects his gold earnings, allowing him to spend years living in Shanghai, building a new life for himself. Essentially, it's an alternate timeline. He's still a drug addict, and so he ends up spending all his money, so he becomes a hitman for hire and gradually grows up to be Bruce Willis. He meets a woman, and they marry, and she basically cleans up his life. She helps him get off drugs. But she's killed when the syndicate come for him. When he overpowers them, he decides to go back in time and alter history. So future Joe's plan is to find the child who will one day grow up to become the Rainmaker in the future. So meeting with his past self in a diner, old Joe explains to his hot-headed, self-absorbed younger self that his future wife will clean him up, get him off drugs, and turn his life around. Halfway through the movie, we're introduced to Emily Blunt's character, Sarah. She's a single mother to Sid, and Sid is the child who will grow up to be the Rainmaker, as we see with his extraordinary telekinesis abilities that he uses to overpower and kill one of the syndicate men. Old Joe ultimately finds them, and he's about to murder Sid, but Sarah stands in his way, willing to protect him. Young Joe realizes that if Sarah dies, Sid will eventually grow so angry he'll become the monstrous Rainmaker when he becomes an adult. It's in this moment that he realizes that he has to break the cycle somehow. His future self will stop at nothing to try to return to the life he had with his wife in the future, and so the bloodshed just won't end. Unless he turns the gun on himself and thus takes both versions of himself out of the equation. And this is how the film ends. Joseph Gordon-Levitt puts in a superb performance. He plays Joe with a kind of a likable, hard-boiled quality, which I think fits the future noirish tone of the movie. He really sells Joe's transformation from the dark, ruthless, cynical hired gun in the beginning to the panicked, self-interested man desperate to save his own skin, and finally, a man who rediscovers some degree of humanity and understands that the cycle of violence and death can only end with a personal sacrifice. The child, Sid, who will one day become a supernaturally powerful monster, can instead experience an entirely different path, one guided by maternal nurturing from his adopted mother, and result in a potentially better future. One of the themes of the film is that past traumas can breed cycles of violence in later life. With the trauma prevented, the dark future can be avoided. I think that old Joe is just completely irredeemable by the end. I mean, he's a child murderer after all, and the trauma that drove his violence can only be stopped by young Joe realizing how he can avoid such a fate. Looper is a dark and violent movie, gratuitously so at times, but it is clever. Sure, there's the odd time travel paradox issue here and there, and that can defy logic, and that's common in such movies with a time travel plot device. But the pacing, performances, and execution of the concept are so well done that these little logical inconsistencies, logical gaps, they're easy enough to avoid and not pay too much attention to. The film makes it clear that messing with the timeline creates these kinds of mind-melting complexities. The audience is still able to understand and appreciate what's going on. Joe is kind of redeemed, but at bare minimum, his life as a killer and contributor to suffering is over, as is his hedonistic, self-centered lifestyle, and he realizes that his actions have serious negative consequences to the world and decides that his death would be preferable than becoming his future self. The film ends on an abrupt and sort of eyebrow-raising, quiet note that could be seen as a tad anticlimactic. But neither versions of Joe were protagonists worth rooting for. The world can only hope that Sid grows up to become a better man than his future Rainmaker alter ego. And that might actually be the best possible legacy that Joe can leave behind. It's also interesting to consider some of the predictions that the film makes from a cultural, socio-economic, and political perspective. The collapse of the United States of America into a post-apocalyptic, drug-ravaged, crime-ridden nightmare controlled by powerful gangs, and where precious metals like gold and silver have become regular legal tender. Everyone appears to be trying to buy their way out of the country, and China, not Europe, is their primary long-term destination, being positioned as the last civilized, safe, and prosperous country on Earth. Interesting indeed. If you haven't watched Looper in a while, I'd recommend you take another look at it. If you haven't seen it before, it's a solid sci-fi time travel movie that I can recommend. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Computing Forever. Hit that notification bell to be notified of future updates. Share the video out there. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.